Hello again and welcome to the Dr. Hilary Show. Coming up, I'll be joined by audiologist Laura Ewen to talk about hearing loss with new research out this week from the World Health Organization showing that only 2 in 10 people worldwide who need a hearing aid actually use one. Plus, the award-winning comedian, actress and author Samantha Baines has appeared in Netflix's The Crown, Call the Midwife and hosts the Divorce Social podcast. As a hearing aid wearer, she serves as an ambassador for the Royal National Institute for Deaf People and has written books featuring deaf characters. This episode of the Dr. Hilary Show is brought to you by Hidden Hearing, one of the UK's largest hearing care specialists. According to the World Health Organization, nearly 50% of people aged 12 to 35 risk permanent hearing loss. That's over 1 billion people worldwide. Simple changes, such as using headphones safely and following the 60-60 rule, that's listening at no more than 60% of your device's volume and taking a break after 60 minutes, can help protect your hearing. Hearing loss is part of the natural aging process due to the tiny hair cells in your inner ear becoming damaged through gradual wear and tear. Our lifestyle choices are causing this damage to happen earlier as well. These days, wearing a hearing aid is as normal as wearing a pair of glasses, and it's just as easy to get help. Hidden Hearing is on a mission to help more people hear better by providing free tests and expert advice. You can find out more about how to protect your hearing and take the free 5-minute online hearing test at hiddenhearing.co.uk. Before my first guest, what answers do you need about your health, those niggles and problems that just won't go away? I receive so many messages asking about your health, whether it's advice on sleep, diet, mental well-being, or just everyday medical concerns. And now it's your chance to get some help with Ask Dr. Hilary, where each week I'll answer your health and wellness questions right here on the show. If there's something on your mind, just let me know. Just send your questions to ask@drhilaryjones.com. Don't wait, get involved, and let's talk about what really matters to you. Now, according to the World Health Organization, over 1.5 billion people experience some degree of hearing loss globally. That's expected to rise to 2.5 billion by 2050. If you're worried about your hearing, you won't want to miss my next guest. Laura Ewen has been working as an audiologist for nearly 14 years. Laura, welcome to the programme.
Thank you for having me.
Hearing loss is actually much more common, I think, than people realise. We're talking about 50% of people over 55 and 80% of people over 70. And on top of that, we know that a lot of young people are at risk of damaging their hearing right now. People aged 12 to 35, 50% are at risk of hearing loss because how they're living their lives. This must alarm you as an audiologist whose whole raison d'etre is to help people with their hearing loss.
Absolutely. The survey recently has shown that nearly half of children aged 12 to 35 are at risk of damaging their hearing just through recreational activities, listening to headphones, gaming headsets, listening to music too loud. The damage that we do now will prevent us hearing in the future.
I mean, that's really important. This is something that we all need to be aware of right now. But I think people are confused about the different causes of hearing loss. So some babies are born with hearing loss. Some babies and children will acquire hearing loss through infections or head injuries. Some will be exposed to too much noise that we've been talking about. But there are so many different reasons. And you must see thousands of people for all sorts of reasons that have become hard of hearing.
Absolutely. The reasons for hearing loss, there are many across the board, but 2 of the most common would be age-related hearing loss, just a natural deterioration of those tiny hair cells in the inner ear, and noise-induced hearing loss. So those hair cells are damaged by exposure to loud noises.
Now, we all recognise people who are suffering from diminishing youth. They're getting on a bit, and they've got the TV on too loud. They've got the radio at full volume. They're saying, "Could you repeat what you've just said?" They get confused about telephone conversations that they can't hear properly, and they miss out on so much, don't they? Socially, they stop going out, they stop engaging at parties and in conversations in the pub or in the club. They neglect their hearing for too long, don't they, when something could be done about it?
It comes on so slowly that people don't wake up one day and suddenly can't hear in most cases. So it's something that they just get used to over time. They notice people mumbling. They can't hear as well, whether in group situations or if there's any background noise. And it creeps up on people over time, so they tend to put it off. But the sooner we do something about it, the better the results.
And it's very frustrating for everyone around those people, isn't it? Because they're having to repeat themselves so often. Sometimes they stop talking to that person.
Absolutely. The amount of families that come into our clinics, and it's the husband, it's the wife, it's the son, it's the daughter, that are actually more affected by the hearing loss every day, because they've watched their loved one fade away. They've watched them take themselves out of family events and parties, and they stop having as many conversations. And to see the family come back once they've been fitted with a hearing aid and see the difference in that person, it makes it really special.
And I've seen that difference so many times. What makes people so stubborn about waiting so long to see somebody?
I think there's a couple of things. I think people don't want to admit that they may be getting a bit older and starting to notice some problem with their hearing. And also people are a bit put off by what wearing a hearing aid or what it might result in. Just recently, actually, we held a training event for some of our staff. And one of the sound technicians from the venue approached me at the end. And he was a young guy, just in his early 20s. And he said, "This has been really interesting for me." I said, "Oh, that's good." And he said, "No, I have signs of a hearing loss because of the industry he works in. He's exposed to a lot of noise. And tinnitus is one of them, so ringing and buzzing in his ear." And he said, "I've put it off because I'm so worried I don't want to wear a big horrible hearing aid and I don't know if it will fit with my lifestyle." He said, "But seeing the advancements in the technology and the products that you have available," he said, "I'm going to go and book a hearing test right now."
Well, we'll talk about the technology in a moment, but it's no longer the beige banana that people wear behind it. It's no longer the scope that grandmothers used to wear back in the day. It is much easier now and less stigmatised, and that's very important. So talking about the other signs, we've talked about the TV and the radio being on very loud, mumbling. What other signs might there be for somebody to notice that the hearing isn't what it should be?
So hearing in groups and background noise is one of the most typical problems. So people often come in and say, "I can hear just fine in an environment like this with no background noise. But when I go to the pub or when I go out for a meal, I really struggle to pick up the conversation." So they can often hear the volume, but they don't have the clarity. So that's one of them. Also a ringing or a buzzing can be tinnitus. People often notice. And again, that can come on quite gradually. So it's not something that people become aware of straight away. But when they step back and think about it, they realise they're having quite a few symptoms all adding up.
Okay. I mean, I certainly have been guilty of being in a crowded room and guessing what someone's just said, saying yes or no, hoping that I'm saying the right thing. I think we've all been there.
Absolutely.
To some extent.
And there will be situations that even with perfectly normal hearing, you will struggle to hear if there's a lot of background noise. But when you start to notice it's impacting more and more of your everyday life, and the TV's turned up and the radio, as you say, that's when it's time to do something about it.
Well, there is a lot of noise pollution, and of course younger people are playing personal devices at a very loud volume. And I think it's true to say, isn't it, that if you're sitting on a train opposite somebody and you can hear the music they're playing, they're damaging their ears.
Yes, definitely. Even on the way here today on the tube, I could hear several people's music all coming through their headphones, and I really wanted to stand up and tell everybody, turn it down. Hidden hearing, we're pushing the 60-60 rule. So we want everyone to follow that. And that is listening to headphones or a gaming headset at 60% of the volume for no more than 60 minutes at a time. Take a break, have a little rest, give your ears a rest. And that really will make a difference to protect your hearing. So
your hearing does recover after that 60 minutes. If you give your ears a chance.
Yeah, it can. It can just help take off some of the pressure from some of the hair cells and just give them a break so that it's not prolonged exposure to loud noises.
Well, if we talk about music, what about going to concerts where, that they insist on playing the music extremely loud? And if you're standing next to a speaker, is that potentially damaging?
It can be. Anything over 85 decibels, which actually a common food blender can be 85 decibels. But obviously at a concert, it's a prolonged time. Now, if you go to a concert every now and again, you're not going to do permanent damage to your hearing. But what we would say is if you're at them regularly, wear some ear protection. Just take off some of that edge of the sound. And if you're at a festival or a concert that's going on for a long time, step back from the speaker, again, have a little rest and give your ears a break from that loud noise.
And I guess wearing ear protectors in certain trades is important as well. I mean, working with a chainsaw, for example, you do see people much better these days, doing their health and safety and wearing the headphones.
Yes, absolutely. There's so much noise exposure in a lot of employment. So we would definitely urge anybody, again, those sounds over 8 to 5 decibels, to get some ear protection on, get some headphones on. They're nice and comfortable now. There's lots of modern versions, so they can be easy to wear.
Now, I know that we've talked about the stigma, so people might walk past one of your outlets and say, I don't think I can summon the courage to go and see an audiologist just yet. If that is the case, and that's wrong, we know, there is an online test that people can do at Hidden Hearing that takes, 5 minutes to do?
5 minutes online test on the website. You can do it in the comfort of your own home, and you don't have to be worried about going in and getting the test results, and it can indicate if your hearing is normal or if there is the start of a problem. If it does, we would urge you to go in and get that hearing test. All of the clinics offer free hearing assessments. You can actually get hearing assessments all across the high street. You can also go through your GP and get them through the NHS. It may take a bit longer, so we would urge people to do something as soon as possible.
What's the difference between high frequency and low frequency hearing loss?
So typical noise-induced hearing loss and typical aging-related hearing loss tends to be higher frequency, just because of the shape of your ear and the science behind it. Low-frequency hearing loss tends to come from some of the other conditions, the acquired and congenital conditions. The low-frequency hearing will be when people notice a change in the volume of sounds. The high-frequency hearing loss is when people start to notice they can hear the volume, but they can't hear that clarity.
Okay, really interesting. Now, if they come and see you, they're going to get expert advice. Where do you start? You identify somebody who's got hearing loss, and you've talked a little bit about how it's impacting on their life. What's the next step? What advice do you give them?
If we identify hearing loss, we would tell them their next steps and give them their options. So we would first of all give full results so that they know exactly where their hearing falls on the chart, and then we would, if hearing instruments are the right route to go down, they would try them in. We would talk through all the different options of what's available, but they would actually try them there and then to see how they respond to the sound.
Yeah. Now, talking of the technology, there's a whole range, isn't there? Now, some are relatively inexpensive, some are more expensive, but I guess you get what you pay for. Tell me about the state-of-the-art technology that is there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a full range to suit different lifestyles and different budgets as well. The state-of-the-art hearing aids really are a world apart from what people probably view hearing aids are, as they have sensors, they use AI, artificial intelligence, to really get the most of the environment that someone's in to be able to help their hearing as best as possible.
Okay, and these days they're almost invisible, aren't they? You'd be hard pushed to recognise some of the smallest hearing aids, where it's just a tiny filament, which is the antenna.
There's lots of different styles, and that's something that the audiologist would talk through. If someone came in to see us and they did need them, they would show them the different styles and find out what would be most suitable for them.
And I'm guessing that because young people and musicians are used to wearing something in their ear, an earpiece, that for many young people that stigma has gone. It's okay to wear something. They see TV presenters with an earpiece and they think, oh, it's cool. And it's becoming much more like wearing glasses, and it's normalised.
Hopefully, and that's our mission. We want to help more people to hear better, so anything we can do to raise awareness and break that stigma is great. And you rarely go past someone now when you're in the street without earbuds or headphones in. Hearing aids can be made to measure in different sizes of fittings into your ear, so they're actually more comfortable than a lot of the standard headphones that people wear.
And we know that the NHS struggles to provide people with the care and attention they need as quickly as possible. So, places like Hidden Hearing are a very good place to start, to come in for a free test, some advice, and to go on from there. You give people choice. Absolutely.
The NHS do the best they can, but they obviously have some limited resources, and it can vary depending where you are as well. So that's the good thing about Hidden Hearing, is it's a national company, so it's available to everyone for that free hearing test. And we will give you the next steps. If someone chooses that they want to go down the NHS route after finding out they've got a hearing loss, then we'll be able to help with that as well.
Excellent. So, Laura, what's your overriding message to people, young and old, to look after their hearing, to keep it as good as it can possibly be throughout their life?
It's never too late to start protecting our hearing. The damage that we do now will impact us in the future. So follow that 60-60 rule, think about your ears, and if you notice any sign of a hearing loss, get something done about it. Go and get it seen. Don't put it off.
Wise words, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, the award-winning comedian, actress and author Samantha Baines, who serves as an ambassador for the Royal National Institute for Deaf People and has written books featuring deaf characters. Before that, don't forget you can watch all my interviews on the Dr. Hilary Show YouTube page, including my conversation with barrister and quizmaster Sean Wallace, a.k.a. the Dark Destroyer.
Jurors are not impressed with Sean Wallace, the Dark Destroyer. They'll be impressed by Sean Wallace, the lawyer. And the one thing my fame can't do, or my sort of celebrity can't do, it can't change the evidence. It's not going to change the evidence. Similarly, if you give advice to a patient, that's not going to basically change all of a sudden magic away what any ailments they have. You've got to be objective. You've got to be dispassionate in relation to the advice you give. So I'm sure, like you, I keep the two things separate.
Yeah. As well as being a multi-award winning comedian, actress, broadcaster and a best-selling author, my next guest also describes herself as a self-appointed accidental activist and a proud ambassador for the Royal National Institute for Deaf People. Welcome, Samantha Baines.
Thanks for having me.
An accidental activist?
Yes.
What is that?
Well, I like the alliteration.
That's good.
Yeah. But yeah, basically, when I discovered I was deaf and got my hearing aid, I went through a process of discovery and then I started talking about it, kind of campaigning for deaf rights. So it happened sort of accidentally,
Okay.
as with a lot of things in my life.
Well, fantastic. And you're doing such a brilliant job. We'll talk about what you're doing in a moment. But when you say you first discovered that you were developing hearing loss, when did that happen? How did that happen?
So it's interesting because I can't ever remember having a hearing test before I discovered I was deaf.
What made you have the test?
I went to my GP with a type of tinnitus,
Right.
but I didn't realise it was tinnitus at the time. I thought I had a spider living in my ear. True story, because we've all seen those documentaries.
It does
and
happen.
It's like that. Yeah, does it?
I've removed small cockroaches from people's ears.
That's
that
actually
have crawled in.
horrific.
You didn't want to hear this, did you?
No, well, but this makes me feel
happens.
better because
Oh, good.
I was saying to people, there's something living in my ear, and they were like, you've lost it. But, oh my God, I'm so glad there wasn't a cockroach. But I thought there might be a spider and it might be like laying eggs, and then all these spiders would crawl out of me. So basically...
You've got a good imagination.
Yeah, I do. Hence the children's books.
Yeah.
But I went to see my GP and she was so lovely. And I was like, please, can you look in my ear? Because I feel like I'm hearing like a scratching noise whenever there's extra loud music or loud environments. And it actually turned out it was a type of tinnitus, which I only assumed was like the high-pitched beep version, which I also have. Because, I love all types of tinnitus. I don't, it's horrible. So I went with tinnitus and then she said, well, let's send you for a hearing test just to check. Nothing else is going on. And at the time, I genuinely believed like it was some sort of like GP bonus scheme where they just had to send loads of people for hearing tests.
We're not like that.
To get a tick
We're not like that.
or something. So I was like, I don't need one, but okay, I'll go.
Tell me about the hearing test that you had that diagnosed you.
Yeah, so I went to see my GP and then they referred me. But a lot of people seem a bit scared sometimes to go for a hearing test. There's actually one you can do online. So it's through Hidden Hearing. It takes 5 minutes and it will kind of give you an indication as to whether you should then go into a branch and see someone, which is really useful.
It starts the ball rolling.
Yes, exactly.
And you're wearing a hearing aid now, although I can't see it. All I can see is some lovely jewellery.
Yes, so I love my hearing aid jewellery. So this is a piece from the Hidden Hearing Love Your Ears collection, and it connects to the back of my hearing aid and then through my ear piercing. So it's beautiful and practical.
Yeah, you can show it off with pride.
Exactly.
Wonderful. So this was a shock to you, and you hadn't noticed, as you say, what you weren't missing. You hadn't really had any signs.
looking back now, I'm like, there were so many signs, but you just blame it on other things. So even when I was born before the newborn hearing tests came into play, so I didn't have one at that very early age. And then when I was younger, I had a lot of ear infections and glue ear. And I remember being at school maybe around age 12 and sitting in the front row so I could lip read the teacher, but I didn't realise that's why I was doing it. I just thought, well, of course you have to sit in the front row, otherwise you don't know what's going on. And I couldn't understand how people could sit in the back and chat and still know what was happening in the lesson. So looking back, there were lots of signs. Like I couldn't hear the TV, I'd turn that up. I didn't like speaking to people on the phone. And I thought that all of these things, like in loud environments, I couldn't understand people. And I thought that all these things were sort of quirks of my personality rather than hearing loss and deafness.
Isn't it amazing how people compensate for something they lack or don't have? It really is interesting. And of course, you've mentioned there glue ear, chronic ear infections, which are common in childhood. The tubes are so narrow. The middle ear is such a small cavity that fills with fluid. It can cause permanent damage if it's not treated properly. And many years ago, I worked in a school for the deaf where 90% of the children were damaged by rubella, which of course has been largely abolished by the MMR vaccine. So immunisation has done wonders for reducing hearing loss from that. But the congenital problems, exposure to noise we've talked about with Laura just now, our audiologist. So many reasons. Did you ever find out a cause for you obviously had it at a young age?
Yeah, no, we never really found out a cause. I mean, my mum is deaf too. She has 2 hearing aids. But it was never something we really discussed as a family, obviously, until I started talking about it everywhere and writing books. And now we talk about it all the time. But so I never even made that connection that my mum's got hearing aids. Oh, maybe I should have a hearing test because I could have some form of hearing loss.
And yet it hasn't held your career back at all, has it? You've been everywhere. You've been on in The Crown. You started on Magic Mike Live London, Lee Nelson's Well Funny People. You've done it all, and you've also got your podcast called The Divorce Social.
Yes.
Tell me about that. So
I got divorced. Aside from being deaf, I'm also have ADHD, I'm bisexual, and I got divorced. So I'm a really fun package. So the Divorce Social, I was in Magic Mike at the time, which people always think is quite a strange time. So I was getting divorced. I was in Magic Mike, which is a show with 15 semi-naked professional dancers and me with my clothes on, directed by Channing Tatum. So I got divorced, cried for a week, then went to LA to work with Channing Tatum on the script, then came back and started rehearsing Magic Mike Live in the midst of all this whirlwind of emotions. But I set up the podcast because really I didn't know anyone else who was getting divorced at 30 like I was. And I just wanted to talk to other people and be like, is this normal? Do you feel this?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So it's quite a selfish endeavour to begin with, but it seems to help people and we've got a lovely community.
Well, I think it's a very lonely experience when it happens. People are often ashamed. They think they're a failure.
Yeah.
But all sorts of difficulties going on, whether it's financial, emotional, all sorts of things. So I'm sure it's a great succor to many people, to share their experience. And it's a two-way street, I guess.
Yeah. And, and also just give people that space to actually talk about divorce. I think sometimes you feel like you're being a burden when you're sharing your emotions with your friends, or you have that one friend that you really rely on. And actually, just saying to someone, I'm giving you an hour to talk about your feelings around divorce. Sometimes I don't even need to ask any questions. I'm just like, off you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's a lot of emotions that connect us if you've been divorced. It's a bit of a club. It's like being deaf. If I say to someone, I'm deaf, I've got a hearing aid, and they have too, immediately we're best friends. And I feel like divorce is a little bit like that too.
Sure.
So we're best friends.
Yeah, absolutely. We are very best friends. And presumably it's men and women.
Yeah.
And you can introduce a bit of humour to the goings on as well, because that's important. It's, although it's awful, it's an awful part of anybody's life usually, especially if there's any love involved still. If there's no love, it's not a problem. But when there is,
it's still sad.
It's still sad. It's still sad
because there was once love, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. But presumably a little bit of humour, having a little bit of a laugh about it is quite healing in a way as well, I guess.
Well, I think that's, I did stand-up comedy for 7 years. I like to think I'm still a bit funny.
You are funny.
Thank you. But so I think for me, and all the kind of challenges, I guess you call them, with like discovering I was deaf and getting divorced and things that have happened to me, and even my dad dying, which was just before I got divorced, in our hardest times, we have to laugh. Otherwise, you'd cry all the time. And I think tears are useful and laughter is useful. And, some really funny things have happened to me in the absolute worst times. I remember my sister and I, at the funeral home when my dad passed away, and we had to go through types of coffin. And we just got the giggles because the types of coffin were a lot like picking like kitchen cupboards, because it's like different woods and different handles, and we were like, oh my god, we're picking like woods and handles for Dad. And like, when we scattered his ashes, we didn't know how to scatter them and if we should use our hands, so we ended up using a ladle. Like, there's just weird things that happen when you're in the midst of grief or challenge.
Sure.
That you have to laugh about because...
And there's even baskets and cardboard coffins you can have these days.
And plant yourself under a tree.
There you go.
I love the idea of that.
Scatter your ashes in the sea or whatever.
Yeah.
All of that is available.
You're not allowed to do it in the Thames. That's illegal.
I know. No, not exactly.
We didn't do that.
You didn't? No, I'm glad to hear it. I believe you. I believe you. It's really interesting, isn't it? That humour. I mean, I've always believed that humour in medicine is important. Laughter is the best medicine. You've just got to be careful how you use it these days, for fear of inadvertently being offensive to somebody. But I do remember having many a joke with a patient, and it breaks the ice.
Yeah, and I think the important thing as well about humour, because a lot of people talk about cancel culture and some people say you can't say anything anymore. But I would say that I always make jokes about my experience. So I'm inviting you to laugh about my experience. I'm
safe.
not joking about someone else's experience that I have no kind of access to.
You laugh with somebody, not at them.
Yeah. And
I get you.
I like talking about my challenges, and helping people laugh also helps sometimes educate and make people think. So, but I would never attack kind of another group or a minority, or never intend to. I sort of stick to talking about me.
I'm going off at a tangent now, but I've always thought that comedians are quite intelligent, because not only is timing important, but remembering the punchline and getting it all in the right order, it actually takes a bit of brains.
Yeah, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. I think people assume that you turn up and sort of just spout lots of things, and some people can do that and are amazing. But stand-up comedians sit down and write their jokes and edit them and try them out and then edit them again, and it's like writing a book, writing a stand-up comedy show or a tour. And I think my stand-up days have given me so many useful skills just for life, but also communication and writing. And
I'm sure. I think it was Bob Monkhouse who was devastated when he left his book of jokes on a train or something.
Yeah.
And it was lost forever. And it was like a compendium of all his best and favourite jokes.
Someone's got that somewhere and is having a lovely time reading it.
I bet you. I hope he copywrote it. Now, I want to move on to Harriet and the Galaxy, because here was your debut children's novel, and your heroine is wearing hearing aids.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
So it was interesting because a lot of things in my life, as I mentioned, are accidental. And writing a children's book was accidental. So I wanted to write a book about my deaf experience, because when I discovered I was deaf, I looked for a book to kind of tell me what to expect. And I could only really find kind of educational ones. So I was thinking about writing a non-fiction adults book, which I did eventually, which is called Living with Hearing Loss and Deafness. But I actually met this really incredible children's publisher called Knights Of, and I found them really inspiring, and they were really interested in sharing stories that aren't normally represented in publishing. And I said, what about a hearing aid wearing protagonist, because we don't see that. And a lot of my work with RNID was with parents with deaf children saying, is there a TV show or a book that I can, recommend or watch with my little one? And at the time, I couldn't really list any off. So I was like, right, well, I better write one then. So, yeah, I came up with this idea for Harriet versus the Galaxy. It's Harriet has hearing aids, and she discovers that they translate alien languages, and her gran protect the Earth from aliens.
Fantastic.
Of course.
Fantastic.
So there are aliens called the Munchers. So the Munchers, there's Sock Muncher. So if you've ever lost a sock, it's because of Sock Muncher eating it.
Yeah.
There's even Knicker Muncher, who eats Gran's knickers off her bottom at one point.
Is that right?
Which is quite a shock for
Which
Gran.
page is that on?
It's like halfway through.
Okay.
You prepare yourself for it. And there's Pen Muncher if you've ever lost a pen.
Yeah, all the time.
And
Where do they go?
and it was really important for me to write some humour into the book and make it silly and fun and alien planets. But also at the heart of it is this hearing aid wearing protagonist who's, protecting the Earth and brave, and also her gran. Because I had a really close relationship with my gran on my mum's side, my Irish gran, I call her. And she was kind of a stay-at-home mum and did all of those things, but she was so strong and so feisty, and I kind of wanted to represent that in a book as well.
Fantastic. And I know you had rave reviews from The Independent, no less. And you did a sequel.
Nice.
There was a sequel book?
No, so my second book was called The Night the Moon Went Out. So it's a different story, but it's another hearing aid wearing protagonist, and she accidentally turns the moon off, as you do. So she goes on a journey with the help of a talking owl to turn the moon back on. But she's scared of the dark because you have to take your hearing aids out at night and charge them. And obviously, if you can't see because it's dark and you can't hear monsters creeping up on you, it's extra scary.
I said you had a vivid imagination, didn't I? And you
I don't know what you mean.
And then you wrote the book for adults about living with and owning hearing loss.
Yeah, so it's Living with Hearing Loss and Deafness, a guide to owning it and loving it,
right,
which was important for me because I didn't want it to be, obviously I'm not a medical professional, so I wanted there to be information in there, and I interviewed people, but I also wanted it to be a kind of, this is all the information you need, but this is also how you can go on that journey to start embracing your deafness. And, now I can say I love being deaf. It's brought so much joy to my life. The deaf community are incredible. The people and friends that I've met. And also, I don't think I ever would have thought about writing books if I hadn't become deaf. And so I really love it, and I love my hearing aid.
And do you think society is kinder to people with hearing loss these days? Do you think the stigma is diminishing? We see sign language being used on programmes, particularly on Sundays. We see the man or woman in the corner doing the signing. This is innovative, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's progress, but I think there's a lot of work still to be done. I think, my hearing aid is very small. Mine's pink. I wear hearing aid jewellery. It streams Bluetooth, so I can watch videos on my phone and answer phone calls if the person is calling me from a quiet place through my hearing aid. And I think a lot of people still don't know that hearing aids are that advanced, or assume that they whistle and things like that. And there still is a lot of stigma for people who discover they're deaf, and a lot of men as well, or men with short hair, because there's no hiding a hearing aid. I can hide it if I want to. I don't, because I love it. I normally pin my hair back, in fact, and show it off.
It's nice.
But I think there's still a bit of stigma around wearing it, and what's it going to look like, and how are people going to react. And what is really lovely, especially among young deaf people, is this real pride in deafness and in wearing a hearing aid and in bejeweling it and showing it off. And I think that's a lovely thing to see, and I'd love to see a bit more of that in the media. And also a range of deaf experience, because BSL, British Sign Language, is so important. I've passed my level 1 exam, but I never had access to that when I was growing up. So my main method of communication is lip reading, which is something that I've sort of just learned over time, but you can go to lip reading classes. And I think some more representation of the ranges of deaf experience, so that it's not just BSL or nothing. BSL is so important, but let's also see hearing aids and lip reading and lip speakers, which are like in sign language interpreters, but they use a lip pattern. So they repeat a lip pattern. So say if we were on a panel and I couldn't see your mouth all the time to lip read, if I had a lip speaker, they'd repeat the lip patterns of your words, and I could look at them and understand what was going on. And we don't really see that in the media very much.
No, we don't. And interestingly, we see people are more aware of this because you see football managers at the end of the big match between Arsenal and Tottenham, and they're doing this so that people can't. They're obviously saying we played rubbish, didn't we? But which you know, you're an ambassador for the RNID as well. Tell me about that work.
Yeah, so I contacted RNID when I discovered I was deaf, and I call myself deaf with a lowercase d, which covers a whole range of deaf experience. Normally deaf with a capital D is reserved for like deaf culture and deaf community, people who were born deaf, into deaf families, use BSL as their first language a lot of the time. So when I discovered I was deaf, I got in contact with RNID because I had a Google and I found them on the internet. And I was like, I want to do things with you and meet other deaf people, please. And I started working with them and understanding some of their campaigns. And then they asked me to be their ambassador, which I was really pleased to do. And so we've worked on quite a few campaigns together around when everyone was wearing masks during the pandemic. Obviously, it was incredibly difficult to lip read. And that was actually a time when a lot of people realised how much they are lip reading and that they might have to have a hearing test. And there's actually an online test you can do on the RNID website, which is like 3 minutes, and it'll give you an indication of whether you should go and see a professional for a full hearing test. But so we worked around lip reading mask campaign, subtitles in the cinema. There's a new healthcare campaign, because when I was having a baby, it was very interesting. Every hospital appointment I had, I'd always told everyone that I was deaf and that I was lip reading, but I'd still get a lot of phone calls with people in very busy environments, so I couldn't understand what they were saying because there's lots of background noise. And also I tried to book a lip speaker for my cesarean, because I had a planned cesarean, because obviously all the staff are behind a screen. You can't see their faces, and it's quite an important and also vulnerable time.
Yes, very.
And that was an interesting process, because my local NHS weren't really aware of lip speakers and what they did. So it was almost like I was educating them on lip speaking to try and get access. So there's lots of really important work that they do, and there's still a lot of work to do. So I really like working with them.
Well, I know that with your cesarean and your baby, you've become quite a medical expert in all sorts of areas besides. And I know that at one point, I think you played a part in a play called Blueprint, where you played a woman with leukemia, dying of leukemia. Is that right?
Yeah.
So that, I mean, I'm interested because I sort of cut my teeth on leukemia at the Royal Free Hospital when I was a junior doctor, and things have changed so much. But what was that experience like for you?
Well, it's interesting playing someone going through a medical diagnosis and things like that. And then also more recently, my daughter has congenital heart disease. So going through that in real life. And I think it will be interesting in the future if I have to play someone going through that, and I might approach it slightly differently. But I think what interested me about that play, and it was quite a small play. We did like a mini tour of it. But obviously someone liked it and put it on Wikipedia, which is nice. But it was a new writing piece as well. But it helped me think about the joy that is life. And the character, even though she was diagnosed with leukemia, and she was looking at, she was a scientist, and she was looking at stars and how there was like a line in the play that we are all stardust. So we start as particles, as part of, the Earth, which was created by a collision of stars. And then once we pass away, our matter goes back into the Earth and will eventually become stardust. And I don't know, that like connectivity was a really lovely element of the play. And it was actually a really positive play, even though it doesn't sound like it might be. But it's really interesting being an actor and playing something and then having not similar, but a medical experience in real life. And I wonder how that might translate if I play something like that in the future.
Well, thank you for not using too much medical terminology, because I spent years trying to forget it after going to medical school for so long, and transmitting messages to the public. But this has been fascinating. Thank you so much. You've educated me and any subscribers to what it's like to have hearing loss and what to do about it, and to become so involved in helping other people. Thank you very much, Samantha.
Thank you.
Thank you to both of my guests today, Laura Ewen and Samantha Baines. And don't forget, if you have any questions about your health, whether it's advice on sleep, diet, mental well-being, or everyday medical concerns, just send me an email to ask@drhilaryjones.com. If there's something on your mind, I want to help. Make sure you watch the next episode and let's talk about what really matters to you. And for more information and show notes on all our programmes, go to drhilaryjones.com.